Asian forms of healing that deals with ki energy is called Reiki. I'm talking with the Reiki Grand Master, Phyllis Furumoto. Phyllis, how would you describe ki energy?
Ki energy is our own personal power source, our own personal life energy.
Phyllis, what's the relationship between Reiki, acupuncture, Aikido, and karate?
The way that they relate to each other is that they all use ki energy, which is our own personal energy. They're all ways of getting in touch with that energy for healing on many different levels. My feeling about Reiki is that Reiki is actually getting in touch with that energy itself rather than using it or manipulating the energy. My sense of other healing orders, acupuncture, acupressure, shiatsu, allopathic medicine, homeopathy, all those are ways of human beings manipulating the energy in order to better come into our bodies and help our bodies being healed. My sense of Reiki is that it is the energy itself. So they are related, not different, and yet the result of a Reiki workshop is very different than the result of a workshop, say, at Aikido.
Can you tell us what Reiki is simply?
Sure. Reiki is a Japanese healing art that was put together in the middle 1800s by a man by the name of Mikao Usui, and it was passed down through Shujiro Hayashi to my grandmother, Hawayo Takada, and that's where I learned Reiki. Reiki is a way of channeling energy by laying on of hands, and we believe that this energy is the universal energy of life itself, and that's what the word Reiki actually means, is universal life energy.
What sorts of things can you heal then?
Well, this energy is the energy of life, and it moves all process. So my feeling on the bottom line is that the only limitation of Reiki is our own mind and our own willingness to heal ourselves.
What have you actually healed with Reiki?
Well, that's a very hard question to answer, because although we've had, or I have had, recessions of cancer and burns going away in a half an hour and all kinds of different physical symptoms, for me they are simply symptoms of our being or our wholeness being compromised. And so for us Westerners, and I include myself because I was raised in the United States, symptoms are everything. But for the Oriental and for us as human beings, I feel like the core of the, or the cause of the symptoms is what's really important. And that lies somewhere in us that's not visible. And only when it becomes visible do we pay attention, which is sometimes unfortunate.
You say it's a laying on of hands. If say I had a particular cancer, is this a laying on of hands directly over that one area?
Well, cancer is very interesting. The way that the pattern goes is that we have a technique which covers the whole body, the head, the chest, the abdomen, and then our back, all down the back. And what I would do if somebody came to me and said, well, I have cancer of the pancreas, then I would go through and do an hour to an hour and a half treatment on the whole body. What that would feel like to me in my experience is that the whole body would need energy, and I would feel that need by physical sensations in my hands. Now, after about 5 or 6 treatments, that person would lose the need in different parts of their body until eventually it would center just around the core of the disturbance, which may or may not be the pancreas. And at that time, then the person decides, or usually goes through some emotional association with that disease or that place, and then we work on all levels with the cancer. So sometimes I feel moved not to even treat that part of the body especially, but to treat the whole body, knowing that Reiki will flow wherever it's needed in the body. So symptoms and causes are very different.
Can you demonstrate?
Sure. I'll just do this. This is something that we do in places where I go to do kind of quickie treatments, because this is a place where we store a lot of emotional and emotional tension, sadness, responsibility, guilt, all kinds of things like that. So this is a nice place to treat.
Is this related to heart chakra? Or?
Yes, it is. The heart chakra, for most people, relates to the heart, but to a lot of metaphysicians, the heart chakra is about the thymus gland, which is located right here, and the metaphysicians say is actually the gland that indicates life force. So the larger and the more healthy the thymus is, the more life force we have in us.
So you would work with different chakras, or basically the laying on the hand over the heart area?
Right. Well, the treatment goes from the eyes, the side of the head, the back of the head, the chest and the throat, down the abdomen to the pelvic bone, and then down the back from the shoulders to the tailbone. And of course, when you treat that, you're treating all the chakras except for the crown chakra. And in my own experience of my own body, I tend to have some reservations about putting my hands on top of my crown chakra, because it's a very special and sacred place. It's a place of energy. So unless there's something going on specifically with that chakra, we usually don't treat it.
You have one hand in front and one in back.
That's simply for comfort's sake. One of the major rules of Reiki is that the practitioner and the person receiving Reiki need to be comfortable, because any kind of muscle tension in the body will block the energy. And that's essentially true for all of us. So when we have tight shoulders because of stress, then the energy that comes down through our head is blocked right here. And so it's not often transferred into action, so we need to effort more with our body in order to have action. That's interesting.
Can you tell then by looking at me where I might be holding tensions?
Not unless it was very obvious, like if your shoulders were up like this or something, pretty obvious in your body. Reiki is very subtle in that you put your hands on people. Some people are very receptive. Some people feel like they've closed their body off in a shield and you can't get through. And other people have spots like that. So you can't really tell until you put your hands on someone. And then you feel the differences in different parts of the body. Rather than comparing one body to another, you compare the different parts of each person's body. So Reiki leads you into a way of thinking that's non-comparative. In other words, you don't get into, well, you're healthier than this other person or anything like that. You just notice where the different parts of the body need energy.
I just want to say that as soon as you laid your hands on, I could instantly feel the difference.
Great.
And I just feel wonderful. There's a lot more energy on the tips of my fingers and then my toes. Is that
That's
common?
right. Yes, very much so, because the energy comes in, basically, you're bombarded with the energy, but I visualize the big place of energy coming down through the crown chakra and then out our hands and our feet. So if your energy flow is strong, then of course you'll feel it in your hands and your feet more.
But every person feels it a little bit differently.
Yes. Some people, I told you that I have a physical sensation in my hands when I do Reiki. Some people don't have any, and some people after a while will have some feeling in their hands. So that's really individual. And you get to know your own hand system. There's a tingling sensation like just when your hands maybe are asleep, what we call asleep, and then they start to tingle a little bit. Well, sometimes you get that kind of feeling. Sometimes you get a pulsating feeling. Sometimes it's very hot. Sometimes it's very cold. And there's just a number of things in between that. And each one of them means a different energy need.
What's really interesting is I can feel the energy start to move through the rest of my body. It's moving up my arm and up my legs, and I'm just wondering if it's going to just continue to spread.
Yes, it will.
What happens to people when they undergo Reiki? Do they generally feel much more energized? They need less sleep, etc.?
Well, that's a very good question, because my experience of Reiki is that it treats people as individuals. Some people say Reiki is an intelligent energy. My statement is that Reiki is intelligence. And that when we give somebody Reiki, the energy goes to the place where it's needed. So if people are very stressed and very wound up, a lot of times what will happen is that they'll come down. And if they're taking a class and they get really involved in the class energy, they oftentimes, to use a euphemism, crash. So they end up feeling very tired, very drug out, and wondering, well, this is supposed to give me energy, how come I'm feeling like I want to sleep for 3 days? And that's very important that they go ahead and follow the whim of their body, because their body will tell them exactly what they need to do. And because of that, you just do what you need to do, and then after that's passed, then your body energy comes up, then your vital energy comes up. For people who have a lot of energy and who have taken care of themselves, it's very easy for them to feel high or feel energized by a Reiki treatment. So it really depends on where you are on an individual basis and what your issues are in your life.
I understand your grandmother was also a Reiki master. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood, how you became introduced to Reiki.
Well, my first experience of Reiki that I can remember was as a child when my grandmother would treat me, and then she would ask me to treat her, and she would tell me where to put my hands. I did that throughout my childhood when my grandmother would come visit. And when I got to college, of course, what I heard a lot from my parents and from the rest of the family was, well, your grandmother does something and it's kind of offbeat. So I rejected it as being offbeat and just went on my way. And about 6 years ago, after I had done my stint in the real world, as it were, working, I went home one day and my grandmother said, well, I think you should do Reiki. And I said, oh, okay. So she said, put your feet flat on the floor, your hands up, and your eyes closed. So I did, and she initiated me, which at that time I didn't know what was. She said, do this and this and this and this. So I did that. That means she showed me where to put my hands. And I started doing Reiki. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew that my grandmother said to do this, so I did it. And a year and a half later, she called me up and she said, well, you're ready to travel with me. I need a companion for the spring, summer, and part of the fall. Will you come? And I said, well, I don't know. And it took me about 2 months to make up my mind that I was going to go. When I made up my mind, I flew back to Iowa from Colorado, and about 2 days later, my grandmother said, feet flat on the floor, your hands up and your eyes closed. I did that, and I was going to teach Reiki, and that was my master's initiation. And so then she said, well, this is how you do the initiations. So she showed me, and we flew off to Puerto Rico. And in Puerto Rico was the first time that I really knew what Reiki was on an intellectual basis, even though it had already changed my life, which is pretty amazing. Her way of teaching was very nonverbal and very in your own life experience. What I've experienced so far in my own teaching is that how I relate to other people and how I relate to Reiki is a very verbal way of being with people, that that's where our communication is right now. So I tell people when I explain what Reiki is that the most important thing is to have an experience of Reiki. The experience of Reiki is what really tells it all. And then to do the classes and to experience Reiki in your life is really a whole nother dimension of that, because you get in touch with your body, your emotions, your motivations for doing things, your spirituality, your resistance to your spirituality, and a number of other things that come up for you. So it is a whole life experience.
So in order to center other people, you've got to be very centered yourself.
That's true. And what I find about Reiki is that if you do Reiki, it instantly centers you.
You mean practice it on someone else?
Or on yourself. You can do it on yourself or on other people. That's the magic of Reiki.
So what's the mental process that you go through when you start the laying on of the hands? Is there
Nothing.
a certain skill that you teach yourself to build?
No. During the class, there are 4 initiations. These are to get us back in touch with the natural energy channel that we have in our bodies. And all you have to do after that is put your hands on yourself or on other people. And that's it. It's incredibly simple.
It sounds simple, and I mean it does sound simple, and yet it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the message of our age, that we need to be aware of how simple life really is, and know that our own mind plays its games, and we tend to make things very complicated. The more powerful we are, the simpler the process, and the other way around. The simpler the process, the more powerful the results.
What do people come to you to be treated for? Are there a lot of people who just come for modern stress?
Yes, Reiki is really effective in stress release and in changing the person's life so that their stress lessons in their own lifestyle, which is really good. So we get to, again, the core of the issue. They come to me for all kinds of physical ailments, mental ailments, emotional distress, and sometimes just a feeling of being lost.
Well, I know that this excess energy that I have in my hands now, I feel like touching someone else.
Mm-hmm. Right. I had a really interesting conversation this morning with a man who said that he had been in the Orient for about 8 months and then came back, and he realized how walled off the Americans are from touch. Like, he went into the airline counters, and they had counters, and then they had plexiglass in front, and then he went into the bank and they had glass, and everything had, and then people were in cars, and people were just sort of glassed in and boxed in, and I feel like that as a society world around, we have really gotten away from where we've come from, which is the earth, and where we belong, which is in the natural environment. We've cemented off the ground. We've built walls around us to protect us from the elements. We alienate ourselves from other human beings with tables and chairs and ideas that we're better than other people or they're better than we are. And Reiki is a part of the movement to come back to touch and really truly touching one another in a way that's not just physical touch, but emotional touch. That the American society is very lonely, and because of the loneliness we have fear, and because of the fear we have nuclear bombs. So for me, the impetus to teach Reiki comes from a wanting to share the gift that I've received from my grandmother, and also it is my way of contributing to world peace. My idea about that is that if each of us is independent and feels secure within our own being, knowing that we're enough for anything that we do, then we won't covet other people's possessions. We won't compare ourselves to other people. And in that, we don't create the barriers that we feel right now between each other. And that's very sad that we have those. And what's going on now is an incredible movement toward touching.
Can you tell me about Reiki and ki energy?
Okay. Reiki splits into, and the way you spell that is R-E-I-K-I. So there are two syllables. And in the Japanese language, the characters have I feel like the way that I can describe the Japanese language, and I don't speak it, but my understanding of the Japanese language is that it is almost a four-dimensional language. There's a lot of substance to each character and a lot of content. For the American English language, we tend to think of things as objects, so it's a very two- or three-dimensional language. So we say table, and it's a table with a flat top and four legs. And in Japan, if you said it's a conceptual language, so the concept of a table is much different than just saying table and itemizing it. So the two syllables of Reiki, the Rei is the universal energy. That is the energy of God, if you will. And the ki is the energy that we hold inside of ourselves. That is our power, that is our energy, that is our source of life. And so there is a martial art called Aikido, and they have ki training, which is to train yourself to be acquainted with your ki and to become more in contact with it. The more in contact you are with your ki, the more powerful you are, not in an aggressive, muscular, like this, but in a way that's powerful and moving and very subtle. And that is the context of Reiki, is that it is a combination of the universal and our personal energy combined in one system, so that we become, again, a more integral part of our own system and then the system of our society.
What are the precepts of Reiki?
Just for today, do not anger. Just for today, do not worry. Show gratitude to all living things. Honor your parents, teachers, and elders. And earn your living honestly. Now, those seem very straightforward and very sort of mundane. We've all heard the Ten Commandments and other wise, pithy sayings from other places. And just like the Ten Commandments and just like those other pithy sayings, the precepts have another dimension of them, which, as you practice Reiki, you really get in touch with. For instance, earning your living honestly doesn't mean just not stealing from people to earn your living. It means having personal integrity with what you're doing, that you feel fulfilled and that you are doing something to contribute to the society. So a lot of people are in professions or are doing things that don't feel like the right thing to do for them, and they need to get out of it. It doesn't mean that it's a bad job, it just means that it's not suited to their personal milieu. And so they have to effort more at what they do for a living. So earn your living honestly. Be clear that that's what you want to do, that it's fulfilling, and that it's not like work. It's a vocation. And a vocation is very different from work.
Could you describe yourself? A lot of people would think a Reiki master would be very holy. Would you describe yourself as a holy person?
That's a great question. Well, no, I wouldn't. I'm a human being, and as a human being, I'm striving to get to the place of fulfilling my own potential, to exploring who I am in this life, and to contributing as much as I can to the world society. Now, masters traditionally walk on water and walk on fire and teleport themselves and so forth. My belief is that we are all masters in the raw, and that we all are in different stages of that development. I happen to have declared my search for mastership through Reiki. Other people declare their search through mastership by Tai Chi or by an East Indian kind of meditation process, or through the Wall Street brokerage firm or whatever. We all are attempting to master our own life in a different way, and my way just happens to be Reiki. I don't feel especially like a special holy being, and I've run into that expectation a lot. I feel like the way that I live my life is very sacred, and that I respect who I am, and that's important to me.
What's in the future for you?
Interesting question. 5 years ago, I never would have thought that I would be where I am today, and I can't imagine what I will be doing 5 years from now. I know that it will be Reiki, and I know that my life will be richer by 5 years, and what those 5 years or 10 years or 30 years bring, I don't have any idea. I feel like that I would like to settle down in a couple of years in a place that feels conducive to creating around me a center of some sort. Not the kind of center where, or I don't envision it as a kind of center where people will actually come and stay for long periods of time and get Reiki treatments, but a center where the Reiki masters themselves can come and find a place to be alone if they want, to meet with other Reiki masters, to promote their own growth, whether it be spiritual or emotional or physical, to promote their own healing so that we can become more attuned and more experienced in what we teach, which is how to live your life.
Thank you.
You're welcome.